On one side of the vast kitchen, the sickening crash of porcelain. On the other, the razor-sharp voice of a cruel stepmother, berating them without mercy. "Hurry up! And don't you dare break another one!" Two little girls, 7-year-old Sophie and Lucy, stood trembling on a wooden stool, their small hands raw and red from the scalding water. They were being forced to wash 300 dishes. Tears streamed down their faces, mixing with the soap suds. They were the daughters of a millionaire, yet they were being treated like servants in their own home. Just as the stepmother raised her hand to strike, the front door echoed. Their father, Richard Ferris, a Wall Street titan, was home early from his business trip. In his hand, he held a beautiful bouquet of roses for his little angels. He walked toward the kitchen, calling their names. But when he reached the doorway and saw the scene, his children broken and sobbing, the mountain of dirty dishes, and the rage on his new wife's face, the bouquet slipped from his grasp. The roses scattered across the cold marble floor. The battle for his family was about to begin. What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. To understand how they got here, we have to go back 7 years. From the moment they were born, Sophie and Lucy never knew their mother's embrace. She had passed away during childbirth, leaving the two newborns in the care of Richard Ferris, then a 30-year-old man in the middle of building his financial empire. Suddenly, he had to learn to be both a father and a mother. In those first few years, the vast mansion often echoed with cries mixed with soft laughter. Richard, a well-known name on Wall Street, would spend nights leaving multi-million-dollar contracts half-read to cradle a daughter with a fever. He'd spend mornings rushing to prepare a bottle because the nanny had overslept, and afternoons reading children's stories in a shaky voice, simply because he wanted to give them what he himself had never received as a child. But as time went on, the workload increased. Late-night meetings, endless business trips abroad, and an empire to maintain pulled him further and further from home. The girls grew up under the devoted care of Elena, the housekeeper, a kind and patient woman in her 50s. Sophie, the older twin, became vivacious and chatty, often trying to get her father's attention. Lucy, on the other hand, grew up quiet and thoughtful, speaking little but observing with the sharpness of someone much older. Despite their differences, the sisters always held hands, clinging to each other as their only anchor in the cavernous mansion. After 7 years of raising his daughters alone, Richard finally gave in to the persuasion of his older sister Martha. She reminded him that the girls needed a mother, and that he needed a woman in the family to share the burden. Martha introduced him to Clara, a 30-year-old woman who had come from a humble background, but who seemed bright, sweet, and well-mannered. "You need someone by your side, Richard," Martha insisted. "She's kind. She comes from a tough background. She knows how to be patient and will take great care of the girls." Clara knew how to win hearts. In front of Richard, she was tender, her voice sweet. She would kneel to tie Sophie's shoelaces. She would brush Lucy's hair until it was smooth, smiling as she called them, "my little angels." Those gestures convinced Richard that perhaps she could be the new foundation his family needed. He married her, which brings us back to that awful day. The clatter of dishes echoed in the large kitchen, a space as cold and empty as a warehouse. Sophie and Lucy stood precariously on the low stool, their small hands plunged into scalding hot water. Beside the sink, Clara stood with her arms crossed, watching. She was dressed elegantly, her nails painted a brilliant red. Her beauty couldn't hide the sharp glint in her eyes, nor the venom in her voice. "Hurry up," Clara spat, her lips curling into a sneer. Daughters of a business magnate, trembling like scared puppies over a pile of dishes. It's ridiculous. Sophie, the older twin, bit her lip until it bled and whispered weakly, "Mom, my hands, they hurt." Immediately, a sharp metallic sound rang out as Clara slammed a spoon hard against the counter. Her eyes burned with fury. "Don't you dare call me Mom. When your father isn't home, you will not use that word. Do you understand me?" A mocking smile appeared on her lips as Clara leaned in, whispering poison. "Your father only cares about me, do you understand? The day I have my own son, I will make sure he kicks you both out of this house." Lucy, the younger twin, remained silent. Her large, clear eyes were already wet with tears. She bit her lip hard, holding back the sobs, as her small shoulders trembled. And that was the moment Richard Ferris, now 42 and president of a financial corporation, walked in. The roses lay shattered on the white tile floor. His daughters, only 7 years old, trembled before a mountain of plates. Their tiny hands were red and swollen, the skin inflamed and raw. And Clara was leaning against the table, her eyes dry, her lips curved in a sneer, without the slightest bit of shock. Richard's voice roared, each word tearing through the air. "Clara, is this what you've been forcing my daughters to do?" Clara shuddered, then quickly changed her tone. Placing her hands on her chest, she feigned a choked sob. "Richard, I just wanted to teach them to be responsible, to know the value of work. You're gone all the time. And if you believe—" Richard strode forward, pointing to the sink. 300 dishes. "You call this teaching? I give you money to hire help. Why are my daughters here like servants?" Clara's eyes began to shine as she let her voice tremble. "You've misunderstood me. I only—" "Enough," Richard interrupted, his eyes like steel. "I will deal with you later." The room fell silent. Sophie looked at her father with tear-filled eyes, her lips trembling. However, she didn't move toward him. Doubt and pain held her back, as if she feared that if she ran to him, he would just abandon her once more. Richard took a deep breath, then knelt and gently took Lucy's hand. He froze. The small palm was covered in red blisters. The skin raised, and even the slightest touch made her flinch. His eyes trembled, his entire body rigid. Without hesitation, Richard opened a drawer and pulled out the first aid kit. The hands that were used to signing cold contracts now trembled clumsily as he unwrapped gauze. He applied ointment and carefully bandaged each of his daughter's small fingers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I should have been here." Sophie lowered her head, tears falling to the floor. Lucy looked up at her father, her vision blurred, but lit by the faintest spark of hope. Richard closed the first aid kit and sat in silence. He couldn't let this incident pass as just a fleeting fit of anger. He straightened his back and walked into the living room. Clara was still standing there, her face bathed in false tears. "Richard, you have to believe me," she sniffled. "I didn't mean any harm. I just wanted them to understand the value of work. These girls have been too spoiled. They need to learn to live realistically." Richard stopped. He clenched his fist, his voice tense. "I already give money to hire a housekeeper. Why did you make the girls do this work?" Clara looked at him directly. "You always think I'm a gold digger, don't you? What kind of father are you when you're never here? I am the one who is here. I am the one who is actually educating them." Richard froze. Those words stabbed like a knife, directly into the weakness he had carried in his heart for years. It was true. He had been absent for too long. He knew he wasn't a perfect father. But did that give Clara the right to torment his daughters? He turned his head toward Sophie. "Sophie, tell me, is what she's saying true?" The room fell silent. Sophie pressed her lips together, her small shoulders shaking. Finally, she uttered 2 words, short and bitter, so sharp that Richard felt as if he had fallen into a void. "You don't care." His heart sank. Those words weren't just a reproach. They were a verdict against a father who had been absent for too long. Lucy gently took her sister's hand, and the two walked away, leaving Richard pinned to his spot. Clara collapsed onto the sofa, drying her tears, but the corners of her mouth curled into a slight smile. Richard didn't notice. He walked slowly toward the staircase. When he stopped in front of the girl's bedroom door, Elena, the longtime housekeeper, came out. She was 55, her hair streaked with silver, her face kind but her eyes full of worry. "Mr. Ferris," Elena spoke softly, "forgive me if I'm being presumptuous, but you need to see more clearly what is happening. The 2 girls are enduring more than you think." Richard looked up, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't say anything, just nodded. Elena sighed and silently pulled a tissue from her pocket. A faint red stain was still visible on it. "This is from Lucy's hand," Elena explained, her voice trembling. She tried to hide it. She didn't want her father to worry, but I saw her biting her lip and holding back during dinner. The skin on her hand is blistered. Richard took the tissue. His hand trembled. The small piece of paper felt as heavy as a stone pressing on his heart. You are their father, Elena said gently. If you truly listen to them just once, they will forgive you. But you must act before it's too late. That night, Richard didn't sleep. He sat in his study, the desk lamp casting light on his gaunt face. The images kept flashing through his mind, the small red swollen hands, and Sophie's cold eyes when she said, "You don't care." Clara entered, wearing a thin silk nightgown. "Richard, you're thinking too much. I just want what's best for them. Do you know how I grew up? In filth and poverty. I don't want the two girls to become useless, always dependent." Richard pulled his hand away abruptly, rage flashing in his eyes. Discipline is not the same as abuse. "I've seen enough, Clara. You're letting emotion dominate reason," she said, her voice honeyed. "You've always been too soft with the girls. If you keep this up, you'll harm them." Richard stood up abruptly and turned his back. He didn't want to hear any more. A determination grew within him. He had to know exactly what was happening while he was away. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of a close friend, David Miller, a security tech expert. His voice was low and determined. "Get me a tech team. I want additional cameras installed throughout the house. Every corner, every hallway, especially the kitchen. Do it without anyone noticing. I want to see everything with my own eyes." The next morning, while Clara was out at the spa, a black van pulled up. 3 men in blue work shirts came out carrying toolboxes. David Miller shook Richard's hand. "You don't need to explain. We'll do it quickly and discreetly." Tiny cameras, no bigger than a fingertip, were ingeniously placed behind bookshelves, inside vases, and in the corners of the kitchen. Elena accompanied them, pretending to tidy up, occasionally coughing gently to cover the sound of drills. When Clara returned that afternoon, loaded with luxury shopping bags, she saw the 2 girls sitting quietly in a corner of the living room doing homework. "My little angels, have you behaved well today?" Sophie remained silent, her head down. Lucy murmured softly, "We're doing our homework, ma'am." Clara frowned. "Why are you keeping your head down like that? Don't you know what respect means? Where is your father?" "In the study," Sophie replied dryly. When the sound of her heels faded, Sophie let out a long sigh and turned to her sister. "See? She never cares about us. Dad is still blind." Lucy took her sister's hand. "Sister, Dad isn't like that. I believe in him." Sophie snatched her hand away, her eyes red. "Believe in what? How many times has he taken her side? We're just a burden to him." That night, the cameras were rolling. In the kitchen, Clara watched Sophie scrubbing dishes. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed. A bowl had slipped from Sophie's trembling hands and shattered on the tile floor. The girl froze in fear. Clara rushed over, her face dark. "You clumsy child! Do you think the dishes in this house are cheap?" I'm sorry," Sophie stammered. Clara didn't listen. She grabbed Sophie by the hair and forcibly plunged the girl's head into the soapy basin of water. Sophie let out muffled screams, struggling as she ran out of breath. Lucy screamed, running to grab Clara's arm. "Stop! Please don't do that to my sister." Clara turned sharply, her eyes blazing. "If you open your mouth again, I'll send you both to an orphanage. Let's see if your father dares to get you out of there then." Sophie thrashed, coughing violently as she came up for air, her hair stuck to her face. In the study, Richard sat rigidly in front of his computer screen. The scene had unfolded clearly before his eyes. His entire body trembled, his fists clenched so tightly that the veins stood out. "My God," he let out in a ragged whisper. "What have I done?" He slammed his hand against the desk. The image of his daughter, being drowned in the sink, repeated over and over in his mind. Later, he went to the girls' room. Sophie looked up, her eyes burning with fury. "What more do you want? You saw it all, didn't you? You always believed that woman. You never believed us." She jumped up, screaming, "You only believe her. Do you even know what we've been through?" She ran out of the room, slamming the door. Richard stood frozen, looking at Lucy, who sat quietly, tears streaming. "Dad," she whispered, "she's just very angry. But I believe you." In her own room, Clara was on the phone, her voice low. "Martha, Richard is starting to suspect. If this continues, I'm afraid he'll discover everything." On the other end of the line, a sharp laugh. It was the voice of Martha Ferris, Richard's 47-year-old sister, sitting in her luxurious Manhattan apartment. "Leave it to me," Martha said clearly. "All you have to do is make those girls hate their father. Once they turn against him, Richard will crumble." Clara hesitated. "But if he finds out about my—" "He trusts too easily," Martha sneered. "That's his weakness. I've been waiting years for this opportunity." "Keep playing your part," Martha hung up. Her resentment ran deep. 30 years ago, she had watched her parents praise 6-year-old Richard. When Martha achieved a similar honor, her mother had dismissed her. "A daughter will just get married. Your brother is the real pride of this family." Those words had festered for decades. To her, destroying her brother wasn't cruelty. It was justice. The next morning, Richard was busy with an online meeting. Clara seized the opportunity, leaning into the girls at the breakfast table. "You know," she whispered, "your father doesn't want you. He only wants me. He said he's sending you both to a boarding school. Once you're gone, you'll never come back to this house." Sophie froze. Her eyes widened. "Is that true?" Clara smiled coldly, stroking Sophie's hair in a fake gesture of affection. "Do you really think your father wants to see you cry every day? He's exhausted by you. What he needs is a new family. A real son. With me." Tears welled up as Sophie lowered her head, her heart filled with pain. All the times her father came home late, the rushed hugs. In that moment, Clara's words seemed to make sense. Lucy grabbed her sister's hand tightly, whispering, "Don't believe her, Sophie. Dad is not like that. I know he won't abandon us." Clara's eyes blazed, her voice cutting like a razor. "Shut up, you're always in the way. One day your father will kick you both out himself." Sophie trembled, pulling her hand away from Lucy's grasp. The poison of doubt had firmly taken root. In the days that followed, Richard watched the hidden camera feeds, his heart shattering with every clip. He saw Clara mocking Lucy for her silence and Sophie for her defiance. He saw Clara deliberately withhold food, telling the girls their father thought they were getting too fat. While Richard was trapped in this domestic horror, his sister Martha was accelerating her corporate attack. She met with Richard's ambitious private lawyer, Victor Cole. "Victor, it's time," Martha said, her voice cold. "Richard is distracted. I want you to start leaking to the board that his family instability is affecting the company. We need to force an emergency vote." Victor, seeing a path to a senior partnership, agreed. "I'll draft the reports. We can loop in Ethan Clark. He's been dying to get his hands on Ferrer assets for years. We'll present him as a stabilizing partner while we gut the company from the inside." The pressure mounted. At the office, Victor formally advised Richard. "The board is worried about you, Richard. Perhaps you should delegate responsibilities to Martha, just temporarily." At home, the atmosphere was poison. When Richard tried to speak to Sophie, she would just walk away. "I'm busy," she'd say, fully believing Clara's lie that her father was planning to send her to boarding school. She felt abandoned, and every attempt Richard made to get close only felt like another lie. The breaking point came at the annual Ferrer Foundation Gala, a high-profile charity event. Clara insisted the girls attend. "They must learn to be in public, Richard. They are embarrassing you by hiding. I will arrange their car and have them meet us there." Richard, distracted by the collapsing stock price and the turmoil at home, agreed. Clara, of course, never called the car. That evening, Sophie and Lucy stood huddled on a cold stone bench outside the Grand Hotel. The bitter winter wind whipped their thin coats. They watched limousines pull up, discharging guests in jewels and furs. "He forgot us again," Sophie finally said, her voice dead. The tears froze on her cheeks. "He chose her. He always chooses her." "No," Lucy insisted, her body shivering violently. "There's a mistake. Dad will come. I know he will." Inside the glittering ballroom, Clara clung to Richard's arm, whispering in his ear. "The girls are just so ungrateful, darling. I arranged their private car, and they simply refused. They are trying to sabotage me. Honestly, I sometimes wonder if they even deserve your love." At that exact moment, Martha's ally, Ethan Clark, was circulating a grainy cell phone photo to other board members. It showed the two small children, huddled and freezing, outside the gala. "This is a disgrace," Ethan murmured. "If a man can't even manage his own family, how can he manage a multi-billion-dollar corporation? He's a liability." This is the moment the trap was sprung. What would you do if you were Richard, being attacked? By your family, your business, and your rivals all at once, completely blind to the full extent of the conspiracy? When the party finally ended, it was Elena, the housekeeper, who found the girls, alerted by a panicked call from Lucy. She rushed them home, blue and silent. Richard, furious and confused, went straight to Sophie's room. "Sophie, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened with the car. Sophie turned, and the look in her eyes stopped him cold. It wasn't sadness. It was pure, unfiltered rage. "How many times have you sworn?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "How many times have you promised? You always choose your job. You always choose her. I don't want to see you anymore. I hate you." She slammed the door in his face. The sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. Richard slumped against the wall, utterly defeated. Later that night, as he sat in his study staring at the blank camera feeds, Elena knocked softly. "Mr. Ferris," she said, her voice firm. "I believe this belongs to you." She handed him a small, worn notebook. "It's Lucy's. She asked me to give it to you if things got too bad. She's been writing down everything." Richard opened the diary. His hands trembled. The childish, clumsy handwriting was a devastating record of the truth. Today, stepmother yelled at sister again, called us a burden. Sister cried. Dad was busy in meetings. He didn't see. I don't know what else to do but write it. He turned the page. Stepmother pushed Sophie's head in the water. I was scared. She said she will send us to an orphanage. Sophie doesn't believe Dad loves us anymore. He read on, page after page. The 300 dishes, the gala, the constant threats, the lies Clara told them about him. He clutched the diary to his chest. The shame was a physical weight. He had been so blind, so absent. A new resolve hardened in his eyes. He couldn't just explode. They were too entrenched. He had to play their game. "They will destroy themselves with their own greed, sir," Elena said quietly, as if reading his mind. "You just have to let them." Richard nodded. He would play the part of the broken man. The next day, Victor Cole arrived at the mansion. "Richard, the board is calling an emergency meeting. They are going to vote you out. Your only option is to sign these papers. Authorize Martha to take temporary control, for the good of the company." Richard looked up, his eyes empty, his face gaunt from lack of sleep. He let the silence hang. Then, a weak nod. "Fine. Let Martha handle it. I need to rest." Victor barely concealed his triumphant smile. Martha stormed into the mansion an hour later, already acting like the new owner. "Finally, you've come to your senses, Richard," she sneered. "You were never strong enough for this. Our father was wrong about you. At dinner that night, Clara whispered to Sophie, "See? Your father has finally given up. He's sending you away next week. Then it will just be me and our new family." Sophie's spoon clattered to her plate. She pushed her chair back and ran from the room, sobbing. But across the table, Lucy watched her father silently. She slid her small hand under the table, finding his. Richard didn't look at her, but he gave her hand a firm squeeze. A silent message passed between them. "I believe in you, Dad." The day of the emergency board meeting arrived. The main boardroom was packed. Board members, lawyers, and even financial journalists lined the long mahogany table. Victor stood at the podium. "Today, Mr. Richard Ferris will officially authorize Mrs. Martha Ferris to assume temporary control of Ferrer Corporation. This is a wise and necessary decision for stability. Martha was already sitting in Richard's chairman's seat, a victorious smirk on her face. Clara stood just behind her, her eyes shining with ambition, already picturing her new life. Richard entered slowly. He looked pale, exhausted. He sat at the end of the table. The authorization papers were placed in front of him. He picked up the pen, twirling it, the perfect picture of a defeated man. "Please, Mr. Ferris," Victor urged. "Just a signature. We must move forward." Richard set the pen down. He stood up. His voice was quiet, but it sliced through the tense room. "Before I sign, I invite everyone present to watch a recording." The room froze. Martha's face tightened. Clara went pale. "Richard, what is this?" Richard pressed a button on the remote control in his hand. The large presentation screen behind him flickered to life. The first clip, the kitchen, the date and timestamp clear in the corner. Clara's voice, sharp and cruel. "Hurry up! Don't you dare break another one!" Then, the horrific scene. Clara grabbing Sophie by the hair, plunging her head into the soapy water. The muffled screams filled the silent boardroom. A board member gasped. "My God!" The screen changed. A new clip, time-stamped from the night of the gala. Clara, on the phone in the living room. "Of course I didn't call the car. Let them freeze. By the time Richard realizes they're gone, he'll believe they're just ungrateful brats. It's working perfectly." The screen changed again. Victor Cole, in his own office, caught on his own security camera, talking to Martha on a speakerphone. "Don't worry, Martha. I'm burying the real Q4 profits. We'll show the board the fake reports tomorrow. They'll panic and hand you the keys to the kingdom." Another clip. Martha meeting secretly with their rival, Ethan Clark. "Once I have control, I'll sell the Asia-Pacific assets to you for pennies on the dollar, Ethan. We'll gut this place and split the profits." The room erupted. "This is conspiracy. This is criminal." The press cameras flashed wildly, capturing the stunned, guilty faces. Clara stumbled backward, collapsing into a chair. "Richard, no. You have to believe me. I did it for you. I was just trying to make them strong. I was scared." Richard turned to her, his voice glacial. "You did this for greed, and you abused my children. You tortured them." Martha let out a sharp, barking laugh. "You think you're so smart, Richard. You think you've won? You stole everything from me. Since we were children, you were the golden boy. You were Dad's favorite. I was just the shadow. I was just taking back what was rightfully mine." Just as her tirade reached a shriek, the boardroom doors opened. Elena entered, holding Sophie and Lucy firmly by the hand. Sophie saw her stepmother sobbing, and her aunt screaming like a madwoman, the web of lies untangled in her mind. She broke free from Elena and ran straight into her father's arms, burying her face in his chest. "Dad, you see? You see what they did? You do love us." Lucy walked up, her small voice cutting through the chaos. "I knew you didn't abandon us, Dad. I knew you loved us. I told her." That simple statement broke the tension. "Richard, please," Clara begged, crawling on the floor and grabbing his pants leg. "Please don't send me back to poverty. I'm so scared." "I'll do anything." Richard looked down at the woman who had destroyed his family's peace, his face carved from ice. "I have nothing left to say to you, Clara. The law will decide your fate." As if on cue, the wail of police sirens grew louder from the street below. The boardroom doors opened again, and this time, uniformed officers stepped in. Victor Cole and Ethan Clark were arrested on the spot for corporate fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Clara was arrested for felony child abuse and endangerment, but the biggest shock was Martha. At the trial, she was unrepentant. "He got everything," she screamed from the witness stand. "Our parents gave him all their trust, all their love, And I was just the spare. I wanted him to feel what it was like to lose everything. Richard stood up in the courtroom. "Marta," he said, his voice heavy with a pain that went beyond the fraud. "I never knew you held so much resentment. For that, I am sorry. I forgive you. But I cannot save you from the law." As she was being led away in handcuffs, Martha lunged toward the family. "This isn't the end, Richard," she shrieked. "I'll curse those children. I'll curse you." Sophie flinched, but Richard pulled her close, shielding her with his body. "I'm here," he whispered. "No one can ever touch you again." Weeks later, the trials are over. The company is secure. But the mansion is still quiet. The coldness is gone, but the wounds remain. Richard kneels in the living room in front of his 2 daughters. He holds the small, worn diary in his hand. His voice is thick with emotion. "Sophie. Lucy, I am so sorry. I let you suffer in your own home. I was blind. I trusted the wrong people, and I was absent when you needed me most. I failed you. But from this day forward, I swear I will always be by your side. No one will ever separate us again." For months, Sophie had held on to her anger as a shield. But seeing her powerful father kneeling, his eyes shining with remorse and love, the wall she had built finally crumbled. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "I just want you to stay," she whispered. "I don't need anything else. Just you, Dad." Richard held her tightly, his own tears falling, as if to make up for every day he was lost. Lucy joined the hug, her small arms wrapping around both of them. "We have Dad back, Sophie." The next day, the 3 of them visited their mother's grave for the first time as a healed family. Richard placed a bouquet of white roses on the headstone. "My love," he whispered, "I've protected our daughters. I was weak, but I promise. I will raise them with all my love. Rest easy. Our family has survived the darkness." This story is undeniable proof that no matter how dark the night, the light will eventually return. Evil will always be punished, and the good will always be protected. Through a journey filled with tears, this millionaire father realized what truly mattered. It wasn't the power or the wealth, but the family that desperately needed his protection. And now I want to ask you, have you ever felt misunderstood or abandoned by the people you love most? Do you believe that, like these 2 girls and their father, forgiveness is the only true key to healing? Share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments. Your words give us the strength to keep bringing you these powerful and heartfelt stories every day.